Hey, Steve here. Yeah, I just thought I might go ahead and give you a little opinion piece about bomb, about Trump bombing Iran again and blundering again. He has no grasp of his enemy. By Sina Tusi. President is behaving as if he's a background to say, but it isn't. Iran has lavished and knows it, and so to war again after a ceasefire and a hard. I don't think it was really much of a ceasefire, but let's go on. Donald Trump is now in the second day of a new phase of bombing Iran, and with the U.S. military claiming to have struck 130 Iranian targets in the past 48 hours. This is no surprise. Speaking at the NATO Air Summit at CAR next week, Trump said believed the U.S. Iran memorial of understanding was over and described Iran leaders as evil, sick people and threatened to renew military action and even blockade of Iranian ports while had leaving the door open for further negotiations. Following fresh rounds of U.S. strikes in southern Iran has Tehran attacked commercial transition the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz. Outside the shipping corridor, it has designated and were also the precursor of the attacks. Later Wednesday, the explosives were exported across the further three locations of land. The conflict will escalate from there on truth, says the U.S. report. This retribution and yesterday's bombing of the shipyard and it's happening again and it will get much worse. But the largely depends on this fracture of something that Washington and Tehran would treat partial estimation of a bridge towards a larger segment rather than the opportunity to preserve leverage for testing the other side's resolve. And neither side came to believe that the other was honoring the commitment that mattered most. From Tehran's perspective, Washington began violating key provision immediately. The Morning First Clause was called for an end to the war in Lebanon was never fulfilled, with Israeli forces continuing operations and maintaining a presence of parts of the country. The U.S. has also reportedly resisted releasing Iran's frozen assets on scale. Tehran expects Trump's continued military threat, including publicly threatening to connect Iranian nuclear during the first round of talks in Switzerland. Then, in July 7th, the U.S. revoked Iran's oil export waiver as Tehran was trying to consolidate control over shipping through Hormuz, not permanently closing the strait, but by force to reverse transit through the designated northern route rather than U.S.-backed southern route. Each side concluded with the other was pocketing successfully while withholding its own. Yet the minutia distress is not simply a product of recent events. Reflect decades of failed diplomacy. Iranian policymakers have seen sanctions repeatedly exposed parts of the left and then reimposed across successive U.S. administrations. From Iran's perspective, the central question is whether any U.S. president can offer sanctions relief and make that relief do much of the U.S. sanctions architecture embedded in congressional legislation, leaving this president to rely on renewable renewables that can be revoked with a stroke of the pen. Business and investors understood the reality, and that's why even after the 215 nuclear deal sanction relief, failed to produce level of investment, banking integration, and return to economic stability, Iran expected. The larger consequence is that Washington has steadily eroded the credibility of sanction relief itself. If economic relief is viewed as temporary investment, it can lose much of the value as a center for lasting policies change. Tehran has drawn a stark conclusion and promised future sanctions relief is simply too fragile to rebuild the country's long-term security and economic development. The leverage is arguably more costly today as it was before the war. U.S. state reserves remain substantially depleted while global over inventories remain tight as shipping through Hormuz has remained far below pre-war level. The world is less of a cushion to absorb prolonged disruption increase the risk of a much larger global shock. Unlike trading away its nuclear program or with a source of leverage in the exchange for sanctions relief that could prove temporary, Hormuz offered Tehran something fundamentally different. It could trade the rest of its own by routing most of the traffic through the designated corridors and potentially establish a joint administration capable of collecting transit fees with a maritime neighbor, Oman. Oman would tie its prosperity to the cost of course is directed to the function of the U.S. global economy. Future U.S. president could still abandon diplomacy. Congress still tied to sex, and doing so would no longer be economically costly. This reflects a broader evolution of Tehran's strategic thinking. Iran today possesses three principal forms of leverage against the U.S. and the U.S. First is its military capability and regional alliance network, include its military and drone forces, asymmetric neighbor assets and partners such as Hezbollah, Houthis, and armed groups in Iraq. They can impose significant military costs, but even better for a sense are likely to fundamentally alter the balance against the combined military power of the U.S. and Israel. The second is its nuclear program, as long as Iran made a partnership in Washington, which, despite serious damage to its economy, still leave Iran with a port option, so he decided. Greece, however, is the third choice of leverage. Control of the region's strategic energy short point above stage removes that has become indispensable. Yet the momentum collapse did not begin as it began rarely almost from the moment it was signed, because the central problem that haunts U.S. Iran policy has no credible basis for trust. Tehran has little reason to believe Washington would even deliver durable sex relief, ban its long-standing strategy of coercion and regime change, refrained from returning to the same policy as once Iran has surrounded with principal priorities of leverage. That's why the struggle with Hormuz has become the momentum defining issue rather than a partial dispute. On paper, the memorandum offer a pathway to de-escalation. Its logic says sequential. Shipments of moose will resume on Iran arrangements. The U.S. blockade in Iran will be lifted. Tehran will receive an oil railway and extensive portion of the process straight over the cease of the war in Lebanon. And together, these steps were meant to create a minimum base of confidence after the war and open the door to the organization of over Iran's nuclear program. But that logic depended on a fragile assumption that Washington and Tehran would treat partial implementation as a bridge towards a large settlement, where the opportunity to preserve leverage while testing the other side's resolve. In practice, either side can believe the other is honoring the commitments that matters most. The ship came to the port less in Washington. This question is not whether Iran is prepared to negotiate, it's whether the U.S. can offer an arrangement Tehran believes will endure after surrender its leverage. The memorandum never answered their questions, and the rest is on assurance of Iranian leaders regarded reversible while asking them to dilute one of the few forms of leverage to consider durable. That does not make diplomacy impossible, but does make the agreement built mainly on promises of future sanction relief are likely to survive. If Washington fails to grasp how profoundly the war has reshaped Tehran's strategic calculus, it will keep negotiating against the subset, no longer resist, and keep producing agreement neither side truly believes the other side will honor. Senior Associates and Senior Non-Resident Fellow of the Center for International Policy, his work focuses on U.S. relating U.S. policy towards the Middle East and the nuclear issue. Well, as it's going, the U.S. is still making attacks, air attacks on Iranian military installations, such as radar, communications, and probably almost hit a nuclear research center. While Iran has bombed U.S. facilities in Bahrain, Jordan, and I think Oman. But remember, we get a point. Iran can just blow up all facilities in the Gulf, including Iraq, Oman, and Bahrain. And that's going to cripple the Western economies, because they never did learn how to get themselves divorced from fossil fuel, especially oil and petroleum. So this is what's going. But it goes, I can't expect thanks for the Trump regime for another 2 years, because all they do is lie, lie, lie.